first phase of the skills development might not necessarily have made a great strides that would have been anticipated. But then what we have then seen over the last few years was that the shift in terms of the curriculum offering, in terms of how the packaging of different learning programs, that will have necessarily been the responsive qualifications to the industry need and what the different sectors requires for their economy and as well as the organization themselves to sustain. So these qualifications in the most were not necessarily responsive. But then what we have seen now, we have then moved into the new space of your occupational qualification that therefore not seeks to really bring closer the theoretical component much more stronger as it would have been in the past into the workplace itself. And the industry has not also been surely coming up to the party as one would have anticipated. And with the occupational qualifications, we are trying therefore now to fast track the role and influence greatly the role of the industry, so as all the program offerings that the SETAs are actually offering, they are able to respond not only to the new economy in terms of the skills needs, but also to the future of work in as far as the skills the future economy will require. And it's for that reason that number of indicator outputs that are put across different sectors seeks to look at both your occupational qualification and as well as the academic qualifications that should be actually a support towards the topic of transformation and also assisting with the sustainability of the businesses through the investment on training and skills development.
What we wanted to know in particular was whether everything that we may want to provide would require certification and what kind of certification. And they informed us that whilst certification by MICT SETA is not compulsory, it is recommended. And they specified that if, as Vodacom, we're entering into a partnership maybe with the likes of Amazon or Google or Microsoft, those companies provide their own certification. And they can absorb the graduates that come from those courses. And we can also partner with other private companies that may want to absorb those learners, but only focusing on that certification. But they made a profound comment that said, if you would want your graduates to be absorbed by government, you have to make sure that they get MICT SETA qualification, because that goes with the SAQA legislation. So we then ended up by saying maybe we need to step back and look at how we deal with this issue of certification holistically, because it doesn't help to produce graduates en masse and then they have an expectation to get a job and they cannot enter the job market because they do not have the necessary qualifications, or the qualifications that they have are not recognized. And then I want to go back to the point that was made in the earlier panel by the chairperson of the Land Reform Committee about the quality of education and the state of education in South Africa. I think we all agree in this room that the education system requires massive transformation. And that transformation cannot be spearheaded by government alone. We need private-public partnerships. As the private sector, we must ask ourselves, what role can we play to ensure that we assist government to transform its education system? Because everyone that was sitting in that panel was fact-checking. I also did my fact-checking about the quintile 1, 2, 3 schools, because we have a high level of inequality in the country, but you also find that inequality in the schooling system as well. where you've got quintile 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 schools. And the majority of the schools, public schools, are quintile 1, 2, 3 schools. Those are the poorest schools, taking children from the poorest backgrounds. Now, as the Vodacom Foundation, we work with some of those schools. It is horrific. The infrastructure is bad. We're talking about brick and mortar. Those learners do not have computers.
We need to understand what CETAs do. So this is the problem, okay? So we as CETAs, we are involved in what is known as occupationally directed learning, okay? We look at your skills, on-the-job skills. We are known to create more jobs for unemployed people than most institutions in this country. And we have been doing this quite successfully over the last, I'll say, 25 years that CETAs came into existence. But in order to understand, establishing a value-structured skills environment or landscape, one needs to understand the economy of the country. Like, for example, if you look at the Republic of South Africa, we have about the largest economy in this country, in Africa. Our GDP is around 381 billion rands. And our economic performance has not been that great. We've been in decline since 2008. But in order to improve economic performance, this would be dependent on having a highly equitable skill system in this country. When I talk of an highly equitable skill system, that skill system has to be aligned to relevant, fit-for-purpose, demand-led skills. I think not everybody has a full understanding of the challenges that the country and that the CETA faces. Coming from a research background, okay, when one looks at just statistics alone, and let me give you some of these statistics, they may be quite alarming, but there are solutions in terms of the challenges as well. Like, for example, we've got an official unemployment rate of around 32.9%. Okay? Amongst the G20 countries alone, we are about the highest. If you look at your 2024 statistics, we were sitting at 33.9%. We were followed by Turkey at 9.3% and Argentina at around just above 8%. If you look at unemployment rates just around in Africa, and if you look at where we were sitting, okay, if we look at Eswatini, it's about 24.65%. Gabon, 21.35%. Congo, 21.26%. So now, you have an understanding of how huge this challenge is and of how huge the challenge is of building a value skill system in this country.
We have to be intentional in terms of requiring our portfolio of clients to actually be part of the solution. So where normal financing houses and banks would have things like financial covenants and so on in structuring their transactions, we have now started being more deliberate about having developmental covenants. If we're funding a new business, there's a requirement that at least a certain percentage must be youth employees within that business. We work with the CETAs to actually place graduates coming out of the formal training environment to now get to the on-the-job kind of training. And what we've seen is that the majority of businesses that make it beyond that rough period of 24 to 36 months of survival tend to sustain themselves into perpetuity through the dips and peaks of the business cycle. And during that 3-year period, if there's an opportunity to intentionally, through our funding as the NEF, to ensure that people employ at least for a 12-month period young trainees, a lot of them get absorbed formally into these businesses. And a lot of them are able to then be employable even if and when they do leave the employ of some of these businesses. The question, I suppose, then we need to help our clients figure out is what is their role in ensuring the upskilling, the transfer of skills, the training of the employees, not just expecting an output. And I think this is where probably all of us, whether it's development financiers, but also entrepreneurs, have to also be intentional about upskilling ourselves to ensure that we know how to impart, what that direction should be.